Good morning in the morning, everybody. Look at this beautiful snail. Wow. Now, most people wouldn't go out on a rainy day to film, but the great part about filming on an overcast rainy day is that everything looks so much more contrasty and vivid and overall creates a moodier look, which I really like. So we can use that to our advantage to create a cinematic video with our iPhone. Before we get started, let's talk about the camera settings. So I'm using the iPhone 14 Pro and I'll be shooting everything on the default camera app. I like to shoot my B-rolls in 4K 60 frames per second. 4K just provides a higher quality and 60 frames per second allows me to slow down the footage, which not only creates a dreamy look, but will also make the shakes less apparent because I'll be shooting everything handheld. Now I'm just gonna do a little bit of location scouting just to see where we can film. Okay, so something else to mention is before you start shooting, you want to lock your exposure and white balance. Because if you don't do that, your colors and exposure will change during your recordings, and that will completely ruin your shot. And it's also pretty hard to fix it in the edit. So right now we're in the default camera app. I have my settings set to 4K 60 frames per second. And right now it's set to auto. So as I tilt up, you can see that the exposure shifts. And as I tilt down, you can also see that the color changes from a more warm tone to a blue tone. And you don't want that in your video. So in order to lock your exposure and white balance, you can simply tap hold on the screen and AEAF lock will appear, which means your auto exposure and white balance has been locked. And you can see as I move up and down with the camera, you can see that the exposure and the white balance doesn't change in your shot. Now, unfortunately, your focus is also locked. You can't separate exposure from focus using the default camera app. For that, you will need to use a professional video app like Filmic Pro. Now, depending on the camera movement you do, if it's like a push-in shot or a slide shot, sometimes you can get away by leaving it in auto. But for camera movements where you tilt up the camera or going from a dark place into a more brighter area, it's better to lock your exposure and white balance. So yeah, keep that in mind and let's move over to the 5 pro tips I have for you guys. So my first tip is to create depth in your video. Now, because smartphones have small sensors, this is a bit more challenging to achieve. But the easiest way to do this is to get close to the object or subject you're filming. So in my case, I used this tree.